how can we ensure, just in the UK, that we have a UK-wide rollout of charging infrastructure? And I guess the real question is, whose responsibility do you think it is to finance that rollout so that it is across the whole country?
Sure, and thank you very much for having me here as well. Just before I start, though, I think it's also relevant to say I think the supply chain is really important when you talk about the charging infrastructure as well. The scale of deployment that's required, actually supply chain becomes really important, and we've started to already look at that as a business. I think also just to the point of vehicles, before I touch on the infrastructure, the cost of vehicles, the part that often is forgotten because we talk about the individual buying cars, is it's going to be fleet that's going to drive this transition in a large degree. And fleet cares less about the purchase price of the vehicle and more about the resale value of the vehicle, or equally about the resale value of the vehicle. And EVs hold up very well. So I think some of the transition there is going to be driven by fleet as well as the individual. And I think that can maybe move quite quickly, providing the infrastructure's there. In terms of driving an EV transition across the whole of society, I think I think there are a number of solutions out there, but maybe I'll start with what happens if we don't get this right. So at the moment, EV is largely dominated by those who have the money to be able to buy some quite expensive vehicles at the moment, although there are fantastic leasing options out there. You don't have to buy the vehicle. But those are often, and I don't have the statistic to hand, but well over 90% of those people are people who have driveways. If you have a driveway today, you can make an EV work for you, because it's the purchase price is important, or the leasing price is important, but it's actually about convenience and reliability. So that is what drives people's decisions. So the people who have EVs today are people who are ideological buyers. They're people who are buying for sustainability reasons. They're not necessarily the rest of society. The rest of society is often buying for logic-based reasons. Admittedly, the rest of society is getting involved and understanding sustainability now, and that is a driver. But people buy based on, is this going to be convenient for my life? And unfortunately, a lot of the charging infrastructure to date hasn't necessarily been the case. Again, if you have a driveway, put a charging point on your drive, you'll use that for 95+% of the times when you're charging. So the public charging infrastructure needs to be enhanced. A lot of the investment's been into rapid charging to date, which is great, but I think we forget when we talk about rapids that often we're talking about a technology speed rather than a user experience speed. So the reason people charge on their driveway at home is because the charger may take 9 hours, but actually it takes 30 seconds in their mind, because they plug in, they press go, and then they're doing something completely different. So user experience is very different to charging technology speed. So we think there's a blend that's required. It's going to be ultra rapids as well as slow fast, and then rapids in the middle. But you're going to see a polarization of charging infrastructure, where you're going to want to have charging infrastructure that meets your user need in the situation. So on a motorway service station, I would never deploy any of our charging points because it would take you 3+ hours to charge your car. By contrast, I wouldn't be deploying rapids and ultra rapids on residential streets where your car sits for long periods of time, and similarly in workplaces. So I think there are lots of solutions out there. We've had as a business, we hope we've come to COP and made some exciting announcements. So for context, the UK market has about 24,000 public charging points. We announced on Monday that we've contracted over 10,000 charging points in the last 3 months, all public charging points to be deployed. I think the unique part, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, the unique part about what we announced on Monday is for the first time we're able to bring private finance to fund alongside public capital, or even on its own. And the reason for that is that those 10,000 charging points, one, the scale is completely different. So pre-pandemic, I think there's been huge progress, because pre-pandemic, you were sort of looking at 30 to 40 charging points with a local authority. In some of those deals now, it's multiple thousands of charging points. But the critical difference, as well as the scale, is the duration of the contracts. So when you're trying to bring finance to this, if you have a contract for 5 to 10 years, you've got a huge risk piece in that. Not around whether EV is going to happen, but really when EV is going to happen and at what scale. So the long-term contracts means that you can manage that. So the contracts we announced on Monday are range between 15 and 25 years, which means I can bring the long-term finances, the infrastructure finances to this, because this has moved from a product sale to an infrastructure proposition. And that's really what I think needed to happen in the UK and will need to happen elsewhere.